This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My guest today is my friend, Mark Greaney. Now, Mark is the author of quite a few books. You probably know him from the Gray Man series, which is coming to Netflix this summer as a major motion picture, which is just awesome. He's also authored 3 books with Tom Clancy and then 4 books after Tom Clancy's passing. He had an Audible original called Armored that came out in December, the hardcover of which hits shelves this summer as well. He's got a ton going on. He's got a huge heart. Awesome guy, incredible writer, and it was an honor to have him on. So without further ado, Mark Greaney. I mean, you had a big year. I mean, you always have a big year. You've added some things to the Gray Man series. I mean, first you had Gray Man, and then you're doing the Clancy stuff, and then you added Red Metal, and then now you have Armored and Sierra 6 coming out in the same year, and a Netflix movie coming out. So it's awesome. You have so much stuff going on. But I want to talk to you about the beginning, like the early days. Writing the first book, and then finding an agent and getting it published. Because I get those questions all the time about, hey, how do I find an agent? How do I find a publisher? All that sort of a thing. I have an idea, I have a story, or whatever it might be. So what was your journey, which has now been over a decade since the first Gray Man came out?
12 years, I guess, since the first one. I should start by saying that, like, the thing that's real important to me that people understand is, like, I didn't know an agent. I didn't know a published author. As far as I know, I didn't know anybody that was friends with an author. Like, you don't need all the connections to make it happen or anything like that. I mean, it's nice, if James Patterson was my next door neighbor and, something, that probably would have been pretty handy, but it all matters in the book. And so it wasn't until my 4th completed novel that I had an agent agree to represent me. And he sent it out to 10 publishers, and 9 of them turned it down, and 1 picked it up as a paperback release. It wasn't this thing everybody was talking about. I was fortunate that right before the book was published, it had interest in Hollywood, and a couple of studios bid on it, and New Regency got it. So I'd quit my job because I'd agreed to write 2 more in the series. It wasn't quit your job money at all. It was sort of like I was committed to writing, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try this. And it was pretty scary, but the Hollywood stuff came through right before the book came out, and I'm like, all right, that gives me a little breathing space for a year or so, and then things happened from there. But initially, I found my agent by just Googling, if it was even Google back then. I mean, it was 2006 or something. It's probably Google. And just looking for an agent that represents some authors that I like. And I found this guy named Scott Miller, and he was going to be at a writers conference, which I highly recommend people go to writers conferences if they want to get published. That got me, a lot further along than I would have gotten just sending emails to people. Mm-hmm. And so I went to a writers conference, and he read the first 20 pages of something I wrote and really, really liked it. But that wasn't the book that he agreed to represent. He ended up passing on the next thing I gave him. And then I gave him the Gray Man, and that's what we got out. So it was a long journey, but if you enjoy doing it, like if you enjoy writing, you're definitely falling forward. You're definitely getting better with each thing that looks like it might be a failure, but you're learning so much as you keep going. So if you like doing it, you just stick with it, and good things will happen.
Well, so why did have you asked Scott Miller why he kept, like, he obviously saw promise in you because of something in those first 3. But because it seems like to me, or seems like to somebody from the outside, that an agent would look at something once and either like it or not, and either represent you or not. But in this case, that wasn't how it was. He saw promise, but hey, this might not be the right thing to launch with, or maybe this isn't just exactly the right one, but there's something here. Just keep sending me things. Is that kind of how it was?
That's exactly how it was. He really liked my writing sample. And then when I sort of told him the whole rest of the story, he was like, wow, that's really ambitious for someone who hasn't been published before. It was like a James Michener, that's what he likened it to, type of a story. And he's like, we need like an action thriller, and you write action really well. And, your characters are great in this. So try something else for me. And I wrote a whole nother book, and he looked at that and he's like, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. He's like, I really love your hero, who was the gray man in this book. It was a book called Goon Squad. And he's like, but I don't think the story's big enough for your character. And you did it in first person. I think third person would be better for this. And so it was really good advice. It was probably a 5-minute conversation where he passed on me. But for the next 9 months, those 5 minutes, everything that he said is what I was trying to execute on the page as I wrote the next book. And I mean, I literally wrote Gray Man for one guy, for Scott Miller, my agent. And I was like, he wants action. I'm going to choke him to death with action. You know, he wants big set pieces. I'm going to he's not going to be able to come back with these, like little quibbles or whatever. So, I just shoved the kitchen sink in that story. And my editor was like, okay, we're going to dial it back just a little bit, before it was published, thank goodness. But Scott saw that this was a book that could get published. And so he ran with me there. And it took 3 or 4 years to get there with him, but he's still my agent to this day. And my publisher, who the first guy that took a chance on me, is still my publisher today. CR6 is my 21st release, and 19 of them have been with Tom Colgan as my editor.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. Who are you reading and flipping to the acknowledgments to find Scott Miller? Like, who had he represented people that wrote in this genre before? Or does he represent people in a bunch of genres, or how did, because he seems like he was really dialed in. Like, he knew what he wanted. He knew what the market wanted. He knew that you had potential and gave you some fantastic advice. So what had he done up to that point?
He represented an author who I was obsessed with, and still am, named Ralph Peters, who is not nearly as big as he should be. He was a Fox News commentator for a while, and he writes articles. Former Army Lieutenant Colonel, or Colonel, I think, as he retired. But he'd been putting books out since his early 30s, and I just looked. I was like, who is Ralph Peters' agent? And that's who I'm going to go after. And I saw it with Scott Miller, and that was sort of back in the internet days where you kind of had to look and snoop and find a website that it's like now you probably just pop up in 1 second. But yeah, so that's the guy I went for. But he as an agent, he represented the Dog Whisperer, Cesar Millan's book, and he represented Snooki from Jersey Shore, and he's represented all sorts of different people, and but he likes these type of sort of action thrillers, so he was into that, and he thought there would be a market for eventually for one of my books. He thought there would be a market for it, so that's why he took me on.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, Gray Man knocked out of the park. I love it. I recommend it to people all the time. So that one, does he then take it, and did he already know they have a relationship with Tom Colgan, or how did he know who to kind of shop it to from there? Was he like waiting in the wings, like, this is the one, I've got our publisher right here that's kind of looking for something like this, and shoots it there? Or did he kind of spread it out and send it to a bunch of different places?
Yeah, there's a finite number of editors in New York that represent this type of stuff, or that publish this type of stuff. And so Scott knew all the names and people. I think I'm 95% sure that he had not worked with Tom Colgan, my editor, previous to me. I think that was the first introduction, but he knew that what Tom, other things that Tom did. He knew that Tom Colgan was Tom Clancy's editor. And so he went to him and he sent it out to other people. But, he sent it out to 10 publishers because there were probably 10 publishers that might have gone with it. And it's fun because I've run into these other publishers. I know some of them personally now that passed on me, and they're like, oh, I wish I didn't pass on you. But I mean, that's just life. You can't I'm not mad at them. Like, it made sense to them at the time, just like things I do make sense to me. But it is kind of nice that the people that did take a chance on me were rewarded, with the success. So it's fun to be on a ride with other people instead of just by yourself.
Oh yeah, no, the team is amazing. Something similar happened with the Terminal List. A friend gave it to an executive at Amazon, who probably gets these things all the time. I mean, all the time. Like, your head of content for Amazon Prime Video, your people are like probably sending you things constantly. And so it took, maybe he looked at it, maybe he didn't. But now that Amazon had to buy it after Chris bought it, he went back to my friend and was like, I remember that thing you sent me and we just had to pay $1 gazillion for it from, just the way it happened. He's like, and my friend's like, you should have listened to me.
I always tell people if they're discouraged about having people pass on them, I'm like, several publishers passed on J.K. Rowling. So let's put it all into perspective. They're not always right. And, I'm sure every one of those people is like, she's generated more than the economy of most countries with her books. And there's somebody that told her, no, thanks, we're good. Yeah. So, everybody's doing the best they can and making those decisions. But, the market changes and whatnot.
Yeah, but I think there's either a book or documentary that talks about all the either books or movies that were passed on, like huge ones, like Star Wars or Jaws or Indiana Jones or whatever, ones that actors passed on. Like, I don't think that's quite right. And then it turns into this gigantic, franchise. I forget what that was, but it was probably some little documentary thing on one of the channels a while ago or something. And then, Tom Colgan is so awesome. I'm such a legend in the industry. Such a nice guy. So do the three, does your agent and Tom Colgan and you guys work together as far as do you run ideas by them, or do you just go? Like for this one, like for Sierra 6, did you just write it and then submit it, or did you bounce some ideas off Tom or bounce some ideas off Scott and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking of doing for the next one, especially because you've done some different things, even with these novels, like this one, the way you wrote this one, the first person stuff. So you've tested some waters and explored things a little bit. Do you run that stuff by them, or do you just go and then just submit?
I am very insecure. So I like to get like a little nod of approval from Scott and from Tom. It's not all three of us talking to each other. I'll go to Scott with an idea, or I'll go to Tom with an idea, or even like a little synopsis. And it always works. With this book, Sierra 6, it's told in 2 different timelines that are 12 years apart. And I was telling Tom, like, I kind of like the idea of an origin story, but how do you make an origin story like fresh and compelling, because people know that your hero is alive in the present. So all those sort of things. But, he said, gosh, if you put something in the present that related to something in the past, like some sort of blowback for an event in his origins in the present, and you work those 2 timelines together and did it right, then that could be really good. And that's, so I started with that idea, like let's part origin story, part contemporary story, and thread them together and, make one relevant to the other. And so it was actually a fun book to write in that regard. I like doing things just slightly different each time. And that was the first time I had done that dual timeline thing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I thought about doing that for the second one, for True Believer, I think it was, and didn't end up quite doing that, but I just had some flashbacks here and there. But I love how you did it. I love how you take these risks, and it's awesome. You're such an inspiration and an example to every writer out there, me included, for sure. And did you write this one? Like, did you do the past stuff and then the present stuff and then combine them, or did you go along with an outline and have, okay, this one's going to be flashback, now I'm going here, or not flashback, but here's origin and here's this story, and then kind of go back and forth between the 2 of them? Or how did you end up doing that?
I had plans to write them one at a time and then thread them together, and I was just so confused by the it's like, how it is, you get deep into the story and it doesn't all make sense suddenly, or not suddenly, or like things you thought you would figure out on the day don't come together. And so I had to kind of write them concurrently, because I really wanted, when you leave a chapter that takes place 12 years ago and you go in the present, I want there to be some kernel of something in there that relates to the last chapter. And both storylines had to be equally as compelling, because we've all read books where, you finish one point of view and then you go into like another plot line. You're like, oh yeah, I got to read this for a while until I get back to the cool stuff, So it was super important for me. And again, I'm not real confident about these things. There's a lot of indecision for months as I write and try little things out. And I tell people, and you might know the same thing, it's when my book is 98% done, it's a piece of crap because it's like there's still like 1,000 things you have to change, and it's literally that last little bit and maybe the first round of edits where you start to go like, oh, book is actually good. It's like you work it out. But as long as there's little holes and little gaps and little logic, pitfalls in the story, if there's anything like that, I just hate the book, and I'm just like, this is a disaster. But I've done it 22 times, and I've always seemed to, come out at the very end. But my books are made in the last 5%.
Yeah. I think it must be with a lot of people. But I mean, obviously you crush it every time. So someone who's picking any of these up would not know unless you said that it's a sprint to the end, figuring these things out, or solving problems that pop up that you didn't anticipate, or that you only get once you read it back through from the beginning, or maybe your editor asks a question about that sort of a thing. But I find that something similar in that, hey, it's done. And my wife says, how close, are you almost done? Yeah, I'm almost there, close. And she's like, you've been saying that for like 3 months. Like, I know, like it's done, but it's like not done. So now she's starting to get it.
Yeah. I can get into my head. It's like, wait, the way at this pace, I'll finish on Tuesday. And then Tuesday rolls around and you're like, what was I thinking? It's like some Tuesday I'll finish. I'm always a little late with my manuscripts, but the problem is like, I write 2 books a year. So if I'm late with one, that means I'm late starting the next one, and it's just just goes downhill from there.
Oh man! So was it always 2 a year, or did you because you have Armored? I want to ask you about that. You had Red Metal, but for a few years you had 2, and then did you go to 1 for a couple years, and then back to 2 projects? Are you looking at it as projects or books, or how are you looking at that?
I look at it as books, although I did write an original audio play, which is the one thing that wasn't a book that I wrote. There have been 2 releases a year, most years. A couple years there was 1 release, and then the next year there were 3. I've had a couple where there were 3 releases. I did a little bit of ghostwriting, so my name is not on the book. That's right. So I had a book come out that didn't have my name on it, a couple weeks away from a book that did. And I remember one of the Tom Clancy books I wrote with Tom while he was still alive. I had my own book come out the same day that book came out. The
same day?
the exact same day. I was competing with myself, I guess.
Wow.
And by the way, he won. He/me won. Well, the book with Tom Clancy's name on it won that contest.
Yeah, it's Tom Clancy. And speaking of Tom, actually, before I ask you about Tom Clancy, it surprises me that my publisher, editor, agent, they don't ask what I'm up to next. Which is shocking to me. I didn't know that going into this. I thought, especially, hey, after the first one, they're going to want to sit down and they're going to want to say, hey, where are you thinking of taking this next? Because we've now invested in you. And then tell them, and then go, I don't know if that really, zero. Right. There is zero input, zero suggestion, nothing until I actually submit this, 115, 130 word thing to them after a year of them essentially investing in me, which is shocking. I mean, I love it because there are 2 things. So I love it because I have total creative control, and if I mess up, it is only on me. I have no one else to blame. Right. But the other side of that is what if they hate it? What? I know. What if I turn this thing in and they're like, oh, this is not up to par, or this is not what I don't know. Yeah.
I always sort of have that fear. So I do like to run it, but I run things by my editor in a general way, and he helps me with the pitfalls and things like that. And then we don't really even talk about the book unless I remember I was in Alexandria, Virginia once. It was back when I was writing Clancy, and I was so lost in my own story. I just called Tom from a coffee shop and can you just talk me through off the ledge here? And in a half an hour, we got everything worked out. But Tom actually has plot ideas. He has, it's the whole gamut. He doesn't need it from me. I don't have to give him a synopsis or tell him what's going on at this stage of the game. But I like that back and forth at the beginning. And then he also, how it is also, because they want to do cover art before you finish the book, or at least in my case, the cover art is before sometimes they even started the book.
Which is great, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was really happy with that cover. Yeah. And they have to write flat copy or promotional copy and stuff like that really early. So, I've had books where it's I think I'm going to set it in Kuala Lumpur. And then they send me the suggested copy for the promotional stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I changed that to Las Vegas or something.
Yep.
And I have to go back to, I was like, oh, I forgot I told you that I was going to do that because I was in the early stages. But yeah, it's, just writing the book and then 6 months later handing it to them to see if they like it sounds a little daunting to me. But I mean, it's great they have the confidence in you, and it's great you have the confidence in yourself to bang it out. And if there was something that they weren't happy with, it would be a trifle compared to like, no, they're not going to make you write another book. They're basically going to
I don't know.
Like,
I asked Emily recently, I'm like, hey, what happens when someone submits you something and they, and you don't like it, or you're like, this is not going to work. And she said, yeah, that's a tough conversation to have. But
I bet.
like, I know. I mean, after a full year, essentially, like, oh, geez. But there'd probably be clues along the way, I would think. Because once again, I have to give that flap copy type stuff. I have to give the art people like, where is this thing even going to be set? Exactly. And so I write kind of that stuff out and I send it in, which also gets me thinking. Also, like, oh, they're asking. I better figure out where I'm going to finish this thing up or whatever else. So it all kind of helps and feeds. So I guess they have little clues along the way from that sort of thing. It's not like an approval process, but I guess they have clues from those sorts of things. But
there's nothing more motivational than seeing your book for sale on Amazon that you haven't written the first word of, and that's happened to me several times.
That is so great.
And I'm like,
hear.
Wow, that looks like a great book. I hope nobody opens it up because it's going to have blank pages in it until I do it.
Seriously, that's great to hear that. I mean, but how could that not be the case with all you have going on? I mean, you have so much going on. It's fantastic. But so with Tom Clancy, so the connection to starting those was Tom Colgan. So
correct. We had the same editor. And it's funny, I never really talked to Tom Colgan about Clancy. I was a massive Clancy fan. He was the first thriller I ever bought in my life was one of his Patriot games. But Scott Miller, my agent, knew it. And I may have told Tom once that I liked Clancy, but it wasn't like, hey, you represent Clancy. Let me, let's talk about him. It was just literally he needed a co-author, and Tom thought of me and went to Scott and went from there.
That's amazing. So so is Tom Clancy at his stage, I guess, after writing all his books, which were obviously very thick, and then he had nonfiction stuff, Carrier and Submarine, and all that stuff, Shadow Warriors, all those sorts of things. And he had video games. I think there's a board game, pre-video game, if I'm remembering.
Probably.
He had all these things, and the movies going on. Like he had all that stuff. So was he just at a stage where he was like, hey, it might be helpful to have somebody younger come in here and work on a couple of things together? Like, did you ever ask him about that, or what was your sense as far as that stuff? Like
I never asked him about it, but that's exactly my sense. There are just a lot of irons in the fire. The people love the Jack Ryan novels, especially at Christmas. And then they started doing a summer release as well. And, it was too much for one person. I was a massive Clancy fan, as I just said. My dad was a massive Clancy fan. And it was really, when it was brought up to me, first thing I thought was like, why, this is the first time I've ever co-authored with somebody. It's like, why does it have to be Tom Clancy? Why can't I get somebody like one rung up the ladder from where I am? It's like, why am I up here in the stars? Like I'm not ready for this. But then I also knew my agent would literally fly to Memphis and beat me to death if I said, no, I don't think I want to write a book with Tom Clancy at that stage of my career. That would be insanity. But I had complete confidence that I knew all the characters and I knew their relationships and I knew how they talked. I never wanted to write, like even after Tom passed away, I never wanted to write sounding like Tom Clancy because that's, I guess, disrespectful. I don't think I could pull it off, and it's really, not what I saw my mission as. And I've talked to other guys that have written the Clancy book since me, Don Bentley and Mark Cameron and Mike Madden and Grant Blackwood, who did it before me as well. And we all sort of agree. It's like, it's our chance to use these amazing chess pieces that we've known about for such a long time and put them in a contemporary thing. Tom's not around anymore, sadly. So, he's not going to give you his view on what's happening in Russia and Ukraine or in North Korea these days or something like that. But his characters, we'd love to see his characters, do that. And so that's why you pick up the mantle and do it. And, I was happy for that chance. 5 years ago is when I finished my last Clancy book. And I look back 5 years ago and like, did that really happen? That was crazy. I wrote books with Tom Clancy. Like it still feels a little bit unreal.
Yeah, no, it's wild. And did you know when you flew back there to sit down with him for that first one, was it like a job interview, or was it already locked in? Was Tom Colgan, like, hey, Tom Clancy,
Yeah.
this is our guy. Was it already like locked in, or was it kind of like a test, do you think?
Well, that's funny you say that. I've never really thought about it in those terms. It was locked in, but it was a breakable moment. I don't know if it was a makeable moment, but no, it was really funny. I sort of wish I had cameras on me the whole time for that, because Clancy has obviously a big group around him, and I don't want to say entourage because they're not like walking down the street, but at the same time, like managers and artistic people and agents and whatnot, and then my editor, and they all sort of set up this meeting between Tom and I at his home in Baltimore. And I was terrified. I was really scared. Like, I would not be scared now. But back then I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to go kiss the ring or whatever I have to do. And they really, it was set up as like a 30, 45-minute meet and greet just to like sign off and, just be like, all right, cool. These guys can work together. And I was there in his house for 4 or 5 hours. We were talking, we had lunch with his wife and all this. And then as soon as I left, because I had to go get on a plane, otherwise I, would have probably stayed all night. I checked my phone and I had like 35 messages from every one of these people in the world going like, what's going on? What's going on? And it was sort of like, no one expected it to be this like confab the way it was. And everybody was like terrified, like, what's happening? It's like, did Mark run away? So it was cool to be able to text people back and go like, oh, it was fantastic. I enjoyed meeting him and everything. So it was, it was a done deal more or less, but he could have undone that deal if he didn't like me
right
very, very quickly.
And I've never asked you this, and obviously we're friends to anybody who's listening. We know each other, but I've never asked you. In my mind, I have this thing set up like a movie scene of you going in and these like huge, gigantic like oak doors or something like that, and like one of them opening and letting you in, and you going in and having this huge wooden desk in front of you, books everywhere, nautical things and models, and him behind with the cap on and the whole thing and the glasses, and then you sitting down in this chair. You guys, that's how I pictured it in my head. It doesn't sound like it was at all like that.
Yeah, you're setting me up for like a really embarrassing story that now I have to tell. When I had asked Tom Colgan, I was like, I'd like to bring a gift to, going to somebody's house for the first time. He said, just get flowers for his wife, because his wife will answer the door, let you in, you give her the flowers, and then they'll walk you into where Clancy's office is, because Tom Colgan had been there a million times with other people from Penguin. And so I was like, okay, so I got some really nice flowers. And I went up to his penthouse, and the door was opened by an assistant or a housekeeper. And she's like, "Hi, how are you?" And she's like, "Follow me." So we're walking clearly into the kitchen so I can meet Alex, his wife. And she opens the door, and I walk in, and I'm standing in Clancy's office, which is exactly as you described it, honestly, with the wood panel and the books everywhere, the nautical stuff, all the caps from all that. And he was sitting at his desk in front of his computer, and he looked up over at me, and he's like, "You brought me flowers?" Because I was standing there with this big bouquet, and I was like, I was told this is going to be different. And so, I actually sat down with the flowers on my knee in front of his desk, and we talked for a minute, and he was like looking around the flowers. He's like, "Let me get those." Like, he was just exasperated, but it was funny. Like, his wife showed up a few minutes later. She went to get us lunch, and they were both laughing about, me going into his office with the big bouquet.
With flowers. That's hilarious.
That was not the best intro, but it worked out.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And did you know before that first meeting kind of the direction that the book was going to take? Did you have an outline or a synopsis or an area of the world or a theme or anything like that?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah. These books are done on a very short timeline, and I was committed to writing another book that year as well. So it was, I remember asking Tom, I was like, let's say I get this job, when will the book be due? And I think he said like, probably July. And I was like, July of the year we're in right now? Cause it's like March, or February. It's February. He's like, yeah. And so there was I was in the running. Like it was not a sure thing. It wasn't like it was my job if I wanted it. They were trying to find if I was interested. Mm-hmm. So I kind of saw the clock ticking, and I was like, I know how writing works well enough to know the due date's not going to change no matter how much time I have to write it. If I get this book deal the day before it's due, they're going to expect the book due tomorrow. So I said, all right, I don't want to waste time. I wrote, with no one asking me to, like a 25 or 30 page segment, like a chapter out of a Tom Clancy book that doesn't even exist, no beginning or end or anything. I just wrote this scene that took place in the Place de la Concorde in Paris, and it had Chavez and Clark, like it sort of had everybody represented. And I just banged that out in a couple of days, and I sent it to my agent, and I was like, what if I sent them that as sort of like, hey, I don't know about the other guys that are in the running or women, but here's my tryout. So we turned that into them, and then that's when they agreed. And then, so we did talk a little bit about the book, and then I went up to meet Clancy.
Okay. And then for the other one, same type of deal. Did you have an idea? Did it come from Tom, or come like through Tom Colgan, or did you come up with it and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and kind of like a proposal, or how did the other ones flesh out?
Yeah, it was a balance. Back at the time, they were very much like, listen, these are Tom Clancy books. You're helping out on them, and you don't walk around and talking about what you came up with and what he came up with, and the book is. I mean,
more process wise, more process wise in general.
Yeah, so it was the ideas came from all over, including Tom Colgan, and there was one of the Clancy books after Tom Clancy passed away, where I wasn't going to do another one, and Tom Colgan's like, well, okay, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I've done so much, and I'm afraid to go back and do another, because it's like, it's like, let's quit while we're ahead and everything. And he said, okay, that's fine. But if you did do another one, what would it be about? And I was like, I've been fascinated about the Office of Personnel Management that was, that got hacked by the Chinese. And like, what if that was weaponized with like social media? And and then like 5 minutes into talking about this book that I had no interest in writing, I was like, damn it, I see what you just did there. You got me excited about this thing that I'd already like passed on. So like literally in this conversation, we were down in New Orleans at BoucherCon, a writers conference, and like at lunch, and like halfway through the lunch, I was like, you just tricked me into working on another book for a whole nother year. And
4 more, right?
So I ended up doing 4 more. And so it was completely, that was my idea, but like he would feed me ideas and I would bounce back, and I enjoy that part of the process. So like 15 minutes out later, after saying no thanks, I can't do another one, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to write this book.
Oh, yeah, it's so wild. Yeah, 4 of them, and those are like, the 3 books in one for people that are listening or have seen a Tom Clancy book on a shelf, not in Audible form, or looking at the at how many hours a narrator takes to read these things. Oh, I mean, it's a long time. And did he pass on any advice to you, or has Tom Colgan passed on any advice to you from Tom Clancy, just about whether it's about process or about creativity or about the business side of it or anything like that? Is there anything that you took from that experience, both with Tom alive and then after he passed away, or through Tom Colgan, that you've incorporated into what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. I see the first 3 books, Gray Man novels that I wrote, which were all written before I started working in the Clancy world, and then Deadeye, which was book 4, and the subsequent books. I see that almost as 2 different periods of my life, because once I was working with Tom, my own books became a lot richer. I'm super proud of my first 3 books there, but I will say Gray Man is kind of like Die Hard in that it like all takes place in a very short period. It's not, it gives you the background you need to root for the characters, but it's not like delving into the deep history of each character. And it's not a huge geopolitical story at all. It's a first person shooter sort of. And that's not dissing my own work. Like, I'm super proud of it, but it was that kind of a book. Die Hard's a great movie. Lethal Weapon's a great movie, but they're just like, super visceral. And then as time went on, I wanted to have all the same action, but I also wanted to have more intrigue and more 30,000 foot level view of what's happening. It's more geopolitical. And that's all stuff that I learned from Tom. And just, like I think it was kind of phrased like, you can go wide and deep as opposed to wide or deep. You could tell a broad story very shallowly or a narrow story very deeply. But, with a Clancy novel, you have the space to write a 200,000 word book, and you can sort of have all those elements in there. And that became the type of writer that I am. So my Gray Man books, the new one, CR6, is 165,000, and there's 2 timelines. So it's basically 2 80,000 word thriller novels interwoven into one. And, that all came from Tom. I mean, I've got to give him so much credit.
Oh, no, that's amazing. And I mean, Gray Man is awesome, but you also did something that I did as well. And I thought about it. I thought about you as I was doing it, because I'm like, I wonder if Mark did this intentionally or unintentionally, in that you write about, you give a hint about something that happened that really propels and was a formative moment in Court Gentry's life, of course, in Gray Man, but you don't really say what it was until not even the second. I mean, you're like, you drew that out a little bit.
Book 5, basically. Yeah. And at book 5, I was like, this is as far as I can draw it out. I didn't know I'd have a 5-book series. I didn't know I ever had to come up with an answer, but I didn't have the answer in book 1. I had the character, and I knew that, the agency that he loved was trying to kill him, which is in the first book, and he doesn't know why they're trying to kill him. Well, neither did the author know why they were trying to kill him. So I just wanted to make there to be this big conspiracy. And then so 5 books in, you're like, okay, I'm glad I waited 5 books, because I probably wouldn't have been able to tell that story as richly, before I was writing with Clancy. So it worked out. But then you come up with new, like, longer story arcs. You being as many books in as you are, that you have your story arc within your novel, and then just the longer thing. And you've got to keep each novel as standalone. So you have to, be willing to introduce everybody again in each book in the most economical way you can. But you want to reward those people that have been with you since Terminal List and all the way through, and say, yeah, there's a bigger story at play here, and you can enjoy that as well. So that's a fun little balance.
Yeah, no, it is fun. And this last one I have a letter that I didn't quite explain at the end of the 3rd one, hinted about it in 4 again. I don't want to say too much about 5, because 5 comes out here in May. But then 6, there can be some more things tied. There's some things that are tied up here in the 5th one that comes out in May, but then there's a little bit left over that I'm going to wrap up in 6. And then I think most of the kind of the outliers from the first few novels will all have been tied up by the end of the 6th one, I think.
Yeah. And that's fun to read. I like reading books like that, where, the character isn't, they have a history on page 1, and then they have, some mystery, even at the end of the story.
Yep.
And I think that's a great way to do a series.
Yeah. I think that's the art part of it. There's, when people ask me about writing, like, your stories all have heart. That's what makes these things stand out.
Yeah.
Like, there are thousands of novels out there, thousands of in the genre, but the ones that rise to the top, there's that intangible, and there's that heart to them, and yours all have that, and I absolutely love it. But I love that too. I love doing the action, and then I think I'm going back and forth, not really intentionally, but it's one of those things that I do think about, hey, is this one going to be a big geopolitical type, or is this one intensely personal, or is this one going to be a mixture? Like, those are kind of, and maybe I'm going to hop around a little bit between those 3, and this one's going to be all intensely personal, and this one's going to be hey, more save the world type stuff, and this one's going to be a little bit in between there and have elements of both. But I love that. That's the art part of it. Also figuring out, like you said, the kind of, you want the people that trusted us with their time going through this thing to have enough resolution by the end that they're like, yes. But then also that one little bit that lets them say, man, I cannot wait until the next novel. So that's the art part of it, is like enough resolution where you didn't just leave them come totally hanging, but also like, oh man, I wonder what's going to happen next. So I
like to explain it that, like, I don't leave a cliffhanger at the end of the story. I wrap up that story and then give you this big boom as the outro, like, oh my God, it's like, I can't believe things just got, more dicey. But it's, it's something that might lead into the next book, but it's just, I don't always love happy endings in novels. I mean, you love them and you don't. And so, like, a lot of my endings are sort of melancholy, and it's more real world, that things don't always work out the way the hero wants them to. Sometimes my hero wants things or does things that I know the readers will probably disagree with him on. And I'm actually fine with that. I think I wrote this book, Gunmetal Gray. It was a Gray Man novel. And he has this personal moral code that says that he has to help this person do this thing. And I think a lot of readers would be like, no, dude, just give him to the CIA and let them debrief him, or, let them interrogate them. And that's the way to do it. But that's not what he wanted to do. And I didn't think it was right for him. So it's not even always about giving the readers exactly what they want. I think what they want is me to, write what I think is the most compelling, entertaining book, and then just keep doing that. And, It's fun. It's always say it's fun when the book is completely done and it looks like this.
Yeah.
But there's a part in the process where you're like, what was I thinking when I got 50,000 words into this thing? But we're at the stage now that this book is done, so I can tell you how great it was. It's next year's book that is is the train wreck at the moment.
Well, and while you have all these things going on, which leads me to was diversification through these different things with Red Metal, which is a standalone, with Armored, that's a standalone that came out on Audible first and then comes out this summer in hardcover. The Gray Man series being so successful, standing on its own with a recurring character, the things that you did with Tom Clancy. So you've slowly been diversifying over the years, and with Red Metal and with Armored, diversifying outside anything Tom Clancy universe wise and outside your own Gray Man series, which is incredible. Was that intentional, or was it just like, hey, I'm interested in maybe trying a couple other things, or I have all this time on my hands, which I know is not the case. So how did that come about? Like specifically, maybe Armored or the diversification in general.
Yeah, so different answers to different ones. Red Metal, which was a novel that I co-authored with a then active duty Marine lieutenant colonel, that wasn't anything I'd planned on doing. I just met this guy at the Pentagon when I was researching a Clancy book, and he was a writer, and he and I just became friends. We didn't become friends for any objective other than like, yeah, he's a good dude and he's fun to talk to. And just over a few years, like we started going back and forth about what a war in Europe would be like. We both loved Red Storm Rising. Came up with that book, and so there was just this day where I was like, listen, we talk about this all the time. We could write a novel. I can go out and get us a book deal for this. And that's what we did. It wasn't anything predetermined, but in my head, I always thought that I could write a military thriller, even though I never served in the military like Tom Clancy, because I really love that genre. And for Armored, I had this idea. I wanted to write a screenplay, and I had this cool story about private military contractors, American guys in Mexico. And I had this idea for a story. I tried to write it as a screenplay, and it was a disaster. It was like 200 pages long and halfway done. And, it didn't look anything like a screenplay, but Audible came to me and they said, we want to do an action, like audio drama with sound effects and actors and all that. Do you have any ideas? And I was like, well, let me give you this thing, read it. And if you like it, I can tell that story as an audio play. And they liked it. So that took years to do, because it's a hard genre to write, to make everything a sound cue or everything done in the dialogue. But it was fun, and I was glad to tell the story, and ended up writing a novel, basically the same story but more fleshed out. That's coming out in July. So it's not a plan to be diverse. It's just you get these ideas in your head. And you think, God, it's going to be 5 years before I can do the next thing, because I'm committed to writing 6 books in the next 3 years. But it stays there in your head, and it kind of like germinates and gets a little bit bigger. And so, I'm happy to have a career where I can, go to my editor and say, like, I have this idea. What do you think about it? Yeah. And take advantage of it whenever I can. Although I'm super busy a lot. You're right.
Yeah, you got a lot going on. And so I have this strategic plan, and I just went over it with my agent last week. Thinking about just my background growing up and being just reading and reading all the Clancy stuff, seeing what he did, seeing how things have morphed over time, the rise of audiobooks, almost the fastest growing segment in publishing, the work I did on these scripts for the Terminal List, everything that I learned as an executive producer, advising on these scripts, being on set there. So this year was very busy. So I kind of took a breath after the holidays, after I finished book 5. And I was like, okay, I need to get all these ideas in one place. I need to put them down. I need to prioritize them because I can't do everything at once, since I'm only one person. But even after this call, the screenwriting thing was so fascinating, because I had no background in it, obviously, other than as a fan of reading and then seeing things that are adapted to screen. So I have a call. So Michael Babe got Armored, right? So one of his contemporaries has been reaching out. We've been talking for the last few months on some separate ideas, and we have another call here this afternoon. But once again, I've been finishing up book 5, and what we talked about on our last call was, hey, let's do this. And he's like, well, next time we talk, just let me know what you think. That's it.
Yeah.
So I've been pretty busy. And then he texted yesterday. He's like, got time to talk? And I was like, yes. And I'm like, oh boy. And I just put the phone down and I just went, just wrote it out. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty dang good.
Right.
I told my wife, I'm like, I'm so sorry that I work better under pressure. She's like, I know. It's just insanity, total insanity.
The same thing happened to me with Armored with the audio play. Like they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I was like, I'm never going to finish the screenplay unless somebody is making me finish it, or I'm never going to flesh the story out unless there's a deadline for it. So that writing under pressure was exactly the reason I did it. I was like, well, sign me up to have you guys hassling me to turn it in, because otherwise it's going to just be one of these 50 million ideas you have. So I mean, pressure. You hate it when it's happening, but you look back and you say, wow, that really helped me.
I mean, I wish it wasn't the case, because sleeping, eating right, and exercising totally fell off, got prioritized at the bottom of my list over the last 3 years. But eventually I'll take a breath and get back to those things. But have you ever came up with an idea that you floated by Tom or Scott that they were just like, no? Really? Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure it's happened more than once, but I just remember I had kind of a medical thriller idea for Scott. And this is like before Gray Man came out, but I was, I'd given him a couple books already. And he was just like, no. It wasn't like I'm dubious. It was more like, no, don't do that.
Well, that's good. I guess it saves time.
It saves you a lot of time. And in this business, you have to have a thick skin and a thin skin, if you know what I mean. It's like you have to be receptive to criticism and also push it away. Like everything's a balance, right? And if there's so much advice you get out there, it's like, oh, just be confident. I'm like, I've met people that confidence is not their problem. I mean, there's people that definitely need to be more confident and they get more done. But there's some people it's like, confidence is not their issue. Their issue is the hard work or the discipline or this or that. So it's a balance for like anything else, I guess.
And speaking of that, people ask me about my process all the time. So for those that are listening to this, that are aspiring authors or that are writers that are trying to juggle maybe a family or another job or something like that, what's your process now, and how's it evolved from the beginning when you quit that job and you went all in? I went all in at the beginning as well. I knew what I wanted to do, and I'm in it. You did the same thing. How's your process changed over time from coming up with that idea to maybe thinking through some characters and plot and locations, and what does that look like over time? How's that shifted?
Back when I wrote Gray Man and the books previous that were not published, when I wrote Gray Man, it was at Starbucks between 5:30 and 7:30 in the morning, Monday through Friday, before work. And I did it in 6 months. I mean, you work 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you will generate something pretty quick. I'm sure I worked on some weekends, but I was so into it because success like progress like spurs you on for more progress. And so that's how I did it. I mean, now I start with a blank page. And, I have some like general macro idea about a story. And it's like the Sultan of Brunei's son wants to overthrow his father, but a Swiss bank isn't, doesn't want to lose the billions the father's hidden there. Go, right. And it's like you start out with 15 words and you've got to get 150,000. And so you just kind of flesh things out. I'm working on my next year's Gray Man book. And I have pages of like, not as an outline, but just like little ideas that I don't want to forget about. And I think can kind of work together, but I don't have that like great through line of the story where I want it yet, but I've got enough stuff. And I have an opening, probably 100 pages. I know exactly what I want. And I've just told myself, you know what, you just need to be writing. And when you get there, you'll come up with some ideas. So it's kind of that the process is, are you a pantser or a plotter? Do you write by the seat of your pants or do you plot your stories? And it's always been a combination for me, but this one, it's like, I don't have a plot. I have everything else, which seems weird, but it's like, I'm going to find that big piece that's going to connect all the puzzle pieces together that I've come up with. So, I'm just just writing it and then see what happens.
Love it. I love it. And now that you've been in this for a while now, over a decade, 12 years, plus the work that you put in before on those earlier novels, what have you seen change in publishing over because there's been a lot of changes, obviously, technologically, just in
Yeah.
our society in
Yeah.
general. But what have you seen as far as in the industry of publishing? What have you seen change over your decade plus now being immersed in this?
Yeah, that's such a tough question because I get asked that sometimes, and you feel very insulated because you're in your world. But I have people all the time ask me about like advice that I probably had better advice for before I was published, because then I knew how to look for an agent and all that other stuff. And it's like I haven't looked for an agent since 2007.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how has that changed? I don't know. Obviously, technology has changed. I mean, the ebook. I remember when I started, they were like, hardbacks are probably just not even going to exist at some point, and that is completely leveled off.
Right.
I probably do 60% ebook, 40% print, and that's consistent over the last several books, I guess. And so that was a thing 10 years ago. They thought was it was just a landslide going in one direction. Audiobook, as you said earlier, has just become a bigger and bigger segment. I listen to audiobooks all the time. I read print when I can. I read Kindle when I need to, and I love listening to audiobooks when I work out or when I walk my dog. And I love that medium too. What I tell myself, and I think you're saying you have all these other ideas and talking to screenwriters and whatnot, is like, I'm a storyteller, whether that is novel form or whatever form, doesn't really matter. And so as the industry obviously is changing, and there's so many other things grabbing at people's time other than just reading printed books, unfortunately, although printed books are doing pretty well. And I know bookstores that are doing great. But at the same time, look at Netflix or any streaming, all the content that is needed now. It's like stories aren't going anywhere. Books aren't going anywhere, but I mean, books, like Tom Clancy probably sold more books in, 1985 than he did in, 2013. Yeah. That's just the nature of technology coming along. But I mean, stories aren't going anywhere. They're clamoring for stories in, TV, streaming, film, audio.
Yeah.
The audio play that I did, there's if we're storytellers, then we will adapt no matter what. And you just have to be able to tell a story, and then just, converting it to, screenplay was hard for me because, when you're a guy that writes 200,000 word books, it's hard to write a 120 page screenplay, which is probably like 20,000 words or something. But I'll probably take another crack at it at some point because it's actually rewarding too.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I learned so much from working with the guys on the Terminal List. It was amazing, especially the showrunner, David DiGilio, is amazing. Antoine Fuqua, director, incredible. But yeah, stories have been around since the beginning of time, around the fire, passing on lessons from the hunt and from battle, and passing those lessons on to the next generation, passing on lessons learned. So, but it is kind of like the Wild West out there a little bit now. With that's what I'm sensing anyway. As I look at the battle space, and I'm like, wow, okay, look at Netflix, look at Amazon Prime, look at Audible, look what people are doing, look at podcasts, look at all. It's like there's so many things out there that aren't just if this then that, like it might have been in 1975 or 1985 or even 1995. Like there's
and you just said podcasts. I mean, I just missed that, but I mean, the podcasts are huge, and I listen to podcasts while I'm working out and stuff, and that's it can be another type of storytelling. And there's been some original storytelling, drama podcasts that are so good. Did you ever see, they actually made a film out of it, but the podcast, I think it was called Homecoming. It was fantastic. It was about,
write that down right now.
I don't like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Just make yourself listen to like the first 3 minutes of that, and you'll just want to hear the whole thing. And it's a podcast. It had a couple of well-known actors in it. Catherine Keener, I think is how her name's pronounced. David Schwimmer. But it's a really good, it's a thriller podcast.
Oh, nice.
All done via audio. But it's called Homecoming. It's really, really good.
I want to check that out. Definitely want to check that out.
Yeah, I think you should.
Speaking of the Wild West, so Gray Man was optioned before it even came out. So is Terminal List. And now it is coming to Netflix this summer. Like that is awesome. So essentially you have, I think you can go online and find out the budget. It's very large. Like this a commercial, a very expensive commercial for the Gray Man series, which will be awesome, which should open, a new audience for the novels, which is great. What did I guess what's that like, and what was your involvement for those listening? How are you just compartmentalizing that as its own thing and just getting to work on the things that you're doing now, or how are you thinking that your creation is now coming out as one of the biggest movies of the summer?
Yeah, I mean, it's still surreal, and I'm sure you feel the same way. It's just kind of like this thing that you wanted is actually happening, and that doesn't always happen in life.
Yeah.
and people say like, "Oh my gosh, your thing was in Hollywood for 13 years before they made it. Isn't that frustrating?" And you're like, "No, I mean, if it was 34 years before they made it, if they ever made it, I'm a glasses half full kind of guy overall, and I'm really happy about it. And as you said, it's a commercial for the books, and that there's slight changes with the story that I wrote, but they were changes made by fabulous directors and fabulous writers, and I think they're really good changes. And a lot of it in the script is geared towards a longer story arc because they want to make a franchise of films. So they're introducing characters that really don't come in my series till book 5, because book 4 is very self-contained. But I am staying very compartmentalized about it. My wife jokes about how kind of marvels it that we don't talk about it all that much. It's it's part of our life that we don't, that doesn't even come up, a lot of the time. And then she's like, yeah. And then I realized, oh my gosh, that thing's happening. That's so weird. We just saw some first clips from the film the other day. So that was, obviously we talked about that, but it's, when you write 2 books a year and you have a bunch of stuff going on, it's tough. But my connection to the film was basically I sold the option to one studio. It came back to me because they didn't develop it. I sold it to Sony. They bought it outright, and then they were going to have the Russo brothers direct it for Sony. And so Joe and Anthony Russo had me come out to LA and spend a few days with them as we talked about the story, because they wanted to write the screenplay as well. Joe Russo wrote the screenplay, gave it to me, asked me what I thought. We talked about it, and it was fantastic. And then that kind of died on the vine for a few years because they were making Endgame and Infinity War, and they were staying busy. I was staying busy. And then it just came around to where Netflix acquired it, and the Russos were like, "Hey, we want to direct it. We want this script." They did some more rewrites on the scripts, and they got the actors involved. So I have no day-to-day. I'm not a producer on it. I don't think I want to be. I have Armored, as you said, is in Hollywood as well. And I am set up to be a producer on that. And it's probably to consult about the script mostly. I think it's really, really cool. I would have loved to have been on set some, but with COVID and with 2 books and everything else, it was just not, really feasible for that to happen. They filmed in LA, but they also filmed in Czech Republic and in Paris, or outside of Paris. So, I'm really happy about it, but, I'm the writer of the books and that's probably not going to change. And then the film is going to be its own thing, and I can't wait to see it, but I don't walk around going, that's, it's like they found out what I wanted to, the 100,000 words that is the Gray Man novel. That's my opinion about the story. So they took that, and then, they made changes here and there, but, I'm happy with all their changes. And I know I'm in really good hands with them because they've always shot straight with me. Stuff they told me that was going to happen in the past is exactly how it happened, So, I love those guys.
Yeah, no, that's so awesome. And I think about you in this context because Terminalist comes out, but I've been so heavily involved with it. If it's awful, I can't be like, oh yeah, Hollywood messed that up,
Yeah.
Whereas yours is awful.
But it won't be awful. Yeah, no, but neither of them are going to be awful.
No, they're both going to be good.
I read the shooting script to Gray Man before it was filmed. So I have lots of confidence in, because the cast is good and the script is good. So I don't know how you mess that up.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the music will be great and all the other stuff. And I'm sure Terminalist, it's like Chris Pratt's not going to work on something for a year of his life or however long, season 1 took him to do if it wasn't fantastic. So it's going to be great.
Yeah. No, it's I think so. I think yours coming out people will be like, this is amazing. What else can I watch like this? And then they'll be like, oh, Terminalist is a series. Boom. And if someone's like a fan of Terminalist and watches the Terminalist and is like, oh, this is fantastic, I want more of this. Oh, Gray Man. So I think they're like self-supporting rather than competitive in nature is how I'm actually pretty sure of that.
Yeah, I'm sure of it too. And it's bigger than you and me. Like if they like the film or they like the series, they're gonna like Brad Taylor, Brad Thor, Vince Flynn, Greg Hurwitz, Simon Gervais, like 50 other authors. Hopefully a rising tide will lift all the boats, because I've always said, when people are like, oh, you guys all seem to support each other. And it's like, well, we support each other because we're friends and because we're lonely, because we're writing all the time. And it's like, wow, this person understands my world a little bit. But we also support each other because it's like, if somebody buys the new Jack Carr book and they love it, they're not going to go, okay, well, I'm not going to read a Gray Man book because, I'm going to wait for the Jack Carr's book next year. It's like if they enjoy the experience of reading that kind of a novel, they're going to seek out other novels. That's what you did, I'm sure, and that's what I did when I was a reader. When I discovered Tom Clancy, I was like, who else does this? Frederick Forsyth, Nelson DeMille, Jean-Luc Carré, Ralph Peters, all these guys, and I just voraciously went them. So we want people to enjoy doing this, spending their time with a nose in a book of this type, and it's terrific when you get a series, it's good for me. Like I'm happy because we're friends, and I'm happy because it'll be really damn cool to watch it. Because I enjoyed the book, but I'm also happy because it's like, it's good for the genre.
No, I think so. And it's interesting today, though. Let's say, Tom Clancy's Hunt for Red October finally gets made into a movie years later, and now people watch it, and either they love it or they don't, and they have a choice as to whether they're going to take that book and they're going to be like, that was different. That was different. That was different. And then they'd be miserable just on their own. And then they'd go home and just, that's just how they live their life. That's fine. But today you could do that and then let everyone know on social media, So it's like, so it's a little, it's interesting. So it's the same thing. People get to choose. Like there are definitely differences in the Terminalist book versus the series. And if you go into it looking at like, nope. And you can, you have to enjoy it for what it is. And
absolutely,
you get to choose that as the viewer.
I'm battling with that myself, because I do see people on social media that are like, they better not change this, or I can't believe this character is playing, that I have an actor who's, I think 33 years old playing a character in the book who's 65 years old. Guess what? Who cares? It doesn't change anything, story wise. And actually it adds like a richness to the story that I didn't think of. So it's amazing to me that people can be so pedantic of it. But you respect it too, right? Because it's like, there's things I've read, that I've read that I love so much that I would want to see it exactly rendered on screen, exactly as it's written on the page. But as I say, like the directors and the writers and the actors and the cinematographers and the art people, they're all artists as well. And it's not just me. And they're not engineers whose job it is to, replicate a page of a paperback novel and put it on the screen exactly the same. They're putting their own spin on it. The opening of The Gray Man, I wrote it in 2007, takes place in Iraq. And, there's a down Chinook helicopter with U.S. soldiers in it. Well, guess what? The movie that's coming out in 2022, it opens a different way. And that makes perfect sense to me. It's going to annoy some people. And I can't help those people. I hope they just enjoy it for what it is. And I feel like it's as faithful an adaptation to the novel as anyone ever had a right to hope for. It's closer to the novel than I had any right to hope for. So I'm happy.
Oh yeah, no, very similar here. And for Antoine and Chris, they wanted to keep the darkness, the grittiness, the primal nature of it, the violence. Like that's what they wanted to keep. With a story that is inspired by, adapted from, a lot of that. But of course, there's going to be changes. You're telling a story visually, not on a written page. So it's going to be, it's going to be different. So that's just how it goes.
When you're comfortable, the director understands the heart of your character and the heart of your story, then you put it in their hands, unless you're a director too. And unless you've got, $50 million to make the film and all that sort of stuff. You at some point you put it in their hands, but it's a wonderful thing when you're like, oh my God, like the Russo brothers, I used to joke, I'm like, they like my book more than I do, which is really putting it in very capable hands because there were things where I was like, you probably want to change this. They're like, no, I think we like it like that.
Nice.
So that's terrific.
Yeah, there's a lot of trust there. There was a couple offers on the table before the book came out, and I went with Chris because of that trust factor. And I think there's a lot of that when especially that a lot of these loopholes that have been closed to authors over the years. Like I remember the story, and I need to ask David Morrell if it's true or not. But with First Blood, when that was optioned, fairly, right out of the gate, I think. But his agent, I remember, it's 1972. And for those who have read First Blood, they know it's very different than the movie. Both are fantastic.
Right.
But I remember the story, and I need to ask him if this is true or not, that his agent was like, hey, keep the merchandise rights. And he was like, what? This is a story of a Vietnam veteran, PTSD, who's merchandise rights? What? And they held him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the first movie comes out. Okay. Then the second movie comes out in 1985, Rambo First Blood Part 2. And then we have lunchboxes and thermoses and video games and cartoon and posters and action figures and all that sort of a thing. So I think they kind of close those off over the years to authors, especially if you're just brand new and you're not negotiating from a position of strength, like I was.
Exactly.
I haven't sold one book yet. No one knows who I am. I'm not coming from politics. I'm not coming from sports. There's no following. I don't even have a social media account, whatever. And you're not negotiating from a position of strength in that point until you get to be like, at book 20 or something like that. And then someone wants it. Now you're selling the whole universe. Maybe you're a little more financially secure anyway. So you can have a little more options.
The average fan doesn't get that. And I've had so many people saying, you better not let them change this, or, hey, why don't you use this actor or something like that? And you're like, well, I don't blame them because I didn't know how any of it worked before this became a part of my life. So, but it's just like, that's, unless you're John Grisham or Stephen King, you're probably not the one calling all the shots as far as like what goes in the final product. But I'm fine with that. Like I said, I write the books and they make the movies, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, no, that's it. You're exactly right. And but it was fun to be involved and fun for them to want me to be involved rather than just like because they saw the contributions that I could make and then that I did make throughout the process. Rather than saying, you ruined my vision. I would never have had that happen. Like, no, hey, we're working together on this. We want to make
those guys are out there. Those writers are out there. And I'm sure they give a bad name. There's probably directors that want to keep an arm's length away from the author because of bad experiences. But I think we're in the same boat.
Yeah, no, I got to hear some of those stories from being on set with everybody and being in those rooms. But so next project wise, so you're working on the next Gray Man. There's probably, there are so many things that you could do. What are you prioritizing next as far as next projects? And then are there any out there that you want to do that are just on the list somewhere that you're like, eventually I'll get to that. So what's next? And then what are some that are like out there, I don't know, 5 years out that you're like, someday I'm going to do that.
Yeah. That's the fantasy book that you're going to work on someday. I am going to finish or write the 12th Gray Man. And then I've got to, then Armored comes out in July. And then I'm going to write the second Red Metal with my co-author, Rip Rawlings. And we're going to do some location research, hopefully in Japan and Taiwan in the summer, late spring or summer. And then after that, I'm going to write the second in the Armored series. I got a 2-book deal for it. And so there's going to be a second in that. And, Gray Man 13 will be in there. But so I really sort of know the next 6 books I'm going to write. But the 7th book, hopefully, is an idea I have for a story. It's called Romeo Running. And it's about there's really no good way to say it, a male seduction artist who works for the CIA. And it's a thriller, but it's a kind of a different kind of a hero. He's a Romeo. So they have Marcus Wolf, who was the head of the Stasi, the East German secret police, used men to kind of like seduce secretaries in West Germany, that were in positions of power, and then the men kind of did that. And so it's a play on that, but on a much larger scale, where there's an American that's involved with that, and it turns out that his wife was murdered by people on the inside. So I'm probably talking about it too much, but it's something I've been like really passionate about for a long time. And one of these days I'm going to do it. It's a slightly different to my genre, but it's also a cool spy story.
Nice. So it says, so standalone, possibly a new series. It's out there after this next group of novels that you're working on. It's the next one in line.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. I love it.
Somewhere in the future. Yeah.
Awesome. But this one, bam, Sierra 6 is out there. And for anybody that finds it now, they're going to go back and they're going to get Gray Man and they're going to read this whole series because this is that good. All of them are that good. They're all fantastic. So I'm just super fired up that you're crushing it in everything that you do, that you're such an inspiration to me and everybody else out there. And we got put in touch, I think right after the first book came out, right around that time anyway, through James Yeager.
It was actually before your book came out, but I'd been hearing about your book for quite a while. So, I knew the name before we were connected via a friend.
Yeah. And you went out there to train with him and tactical response, and you post pictures of that every now and again. And he has some health issues right now. And I know he posted a video on YouTube about it, saying he didn't want anyone's thoughts and prayers, but anybody listening out there, feel free to throw some thoughts and prayers James Yeager's way.
Yeah. I love that guy. He's a really good, he's a good human being.
Yeah. Huge heart.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much for spending all this time. And what are you going to BoucherCon this year or Thriller Fest or any of those things?
I'm going to any place that will let me come. I'm going this year. I'm going to go to Thriller Fest and BoucherCon this year, and I'm excited to, it seems speculative because I think we got close to having Thriller Fest last year, and then they shut it down. But my intention is to be, if it's up, I'm there.
Awesome.
So I'm looking forward to that and hanging out with you. Hopefully you'll be there.
I think this one, there was something that was, the book was coming out. That's right. So I was going to be on book tour during, I think, the time. I have to go back and look now because the time has shifted a little bit. But I have to go back and check. But I think there were conflicts this year, but then not for the next year. So the calendar fills up so far in advance these days. But I think for the next year, it is clear. But if I don't see it one of those, I hope we can link up at some point soon. Because you're the last. We did an event together right before all the shutdowns happened.
That's crazy. Right. 2 years ago. That was 2 years ago, and we were talking about it because it was starting then, and we're kind of like, is this going to be a big deal? Whatever. And then the world shut down a few weeks later. Yep. That's exactly right.
And was it the end of February? Because we linked up at Poison Pen for the start of that book in 2020. And I think, and then we went to Florida for the book festival, and that was the one that was super dicey. Like I was getting on the plane, and I remember a doctor friend called me and is like, turn around. And I'm like walking down onto the thing. I'm like,
It was when they were saying this is going to be bad, but it was before they were saying we're going to try and lock down, the world or whatever. It's like I still couldn't have foreseen that, a week before it happened. I couldn't have foreseen it. So you and I were down there shaking hands and
that was crazy,
hugging people.
But it was but people were talking. A couple authors didn't come, I remember, but everybody was there. There was no masks yet. We were going to bars still, we went to dinner, like all that sort of thing. And then really like days later, boom, the world really changed.
Absolutely.
Which is crazy. Well, I'm hoping we can link up at, one of these events or just, or without an event, one of these days soon and have some dinner and hang out for a little bit and catch up. But that's why I love the podcast, is because it gave us an excuse to do this.
This has been fun.
Without it, we wouldn't have probably caught up this way.
We would roughly be talking about the exact same things if you and I were sitting there having dinner.
Yeah, exactly. Now we get to record it and hopefully let some more people know that they can get Sierra 6 and check out all the other things you have going on with Armored that came out in December, right? December Audible came out, and then this summer the hardcover will come out. So
the novel,
man, I'm just so excited everything that's happening, and I can't wait for Gray Man to watch that, to see what they did with it on Netflix. I know it's going to be fantastic, and man, thank you so much for jumping on.
Jack, I'm really happy for how things are going for you too as well, and I cannot wait to watch The Terminalist. That's going to be a fun party around my house watching that.
Awesome.
So congratulations to you too, and thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed that.
Absolutely. You take care. Talk soon. Just want to take a moment and thank Navy Federal Credit Union for sponsoring the podcast and for being a part of my journey throughout the military and today. Right there, that's my Navy Federal Q card that I got in 1996, right after boot camp. So for those 20 years I was in the military, Navy Federal was right there with me. What I found out recently is that you do not have to be a member of the military to go to NavyFederal.org, check it out, and become member. So check it out, NavyFederal.org. Thank you guys so much again for sponsoring the podcast and for taking such good care of me and my family over the last 20 years in the military and today. I want to talk to you for a second about a company called 10,000. Maybe I'm introducing you to this company. Maybe you've heard about them before, but I believe that they have successfully developed the world's most comfortable workout short. And I don't say that lightly. I've tried out a lot of shorts in my time, both before the military, in the SEAL teams, and now afterward. And I don't think I can ever wear another workout short. These guys are awesome. The tactical short, the interval short, definitely check them out. 10,000.cc. And not only do they have awesome shorts, and they have long pants, and they have shirts like this one as well. See that? 10,000. Awesome. But the website, that'll inspire you just to get going regardless, but it's broken down in a way that makes sense. It's fun to explore. There's not a gazillion options on there. They've broken it down to the essentials, and check it out, 10,000.cc. And there's even like winter kits, high intensity workout kits. So you're not picking and choosing a bunch of different things. If you want winter workout, you want high intensity training, whatever it is, you click on that, bam, and they have some suggestions there for you. Very well thought out, super easy to navigate. So highly recommend checking out 10,000.cc. I want to read a little bit about them here. The tactical short, which is this one right here. Boom, the green ones. And I know I've been doing a lot more typing recently than I've been doing working out. So I can tell you, even if you're an author, that you can type in these and get a 120,000 word book done, just like you can go outside and do a high intensity workout. So right here, tactical short. Over here is the interval short right here. They have a bunch of shirts, a bunch of other things on there as well. But the tactical short was developed and tested with over 50 special operations members who put it to the test by rucking, swimming, lifting, all around beating it up, producing the holy grail of tough workout shorts. That is true. These things are awesome. The interval short is the most versatile style, perfect for gym days, spinning short runs, high intensity training, and backyard workouts. They both have great features like permanent anti-odor protection, an optional liner that is very comfortable and prevents chafing, 4-way stretch, breathable and lightweight shell fabric. And this is what I love also about 10,000. They believe in being better than yesterday. And I love that because I want each of my novels to be better than the next one. I want every chapter to be better than the earlier one. I want to be a better human each and every day going forward. So I love that. Being better than yesterday is their motto. A stoic dedication to continuous improvement, not overnight success. They're putting in the work. I love it. They have a team of over 200 athletes that test the gear and ensure the perfect design, fabric, trims, and fit, and free shipping and free returns, and a lifetime guarantee. So 10,000 is offering Danger Close listeners 15% off your purchase. Go to 10,000.cc and enter the code DangerClose15. Receive 15% off your purchase. That's 10,000.cc and enter the code DangerClose15 for 15% off. Trust me, you will thank me. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. So this watch right here, Vertex Watch Company. So go to Vertex Watches, just type that in your search bar. It'll pop up. They're a company out of UK with an amazing history. I found out about them through my buddy, Dean Stott, who has been on the podcast before, has a book called Relentless, former SBS guy, incredible person, and also incredibly kind. Amazing book. Check out the podcast, get the book. But Vertex watches right here. They sent me this, and it is awesome. I love watches that have a rich history, especially when they're connected to the military. So check out Vertex watches. Go check that out. And yeah, this thing, you can definitely tell that it is a classic. And once again, check them out. Came in this sweet box right here, Vertex. Thank you guys so much. And what a cool thing to do to continue this legacy and pay homage to the past at the same time. So just very cool. Very cool. Thank you. What else do I have here? So this is Naked Sauce right here, my buddy Trevor's new company. And this is the pasta sauce, but I would be showing you the salsa, but I crushed all the salsa that he sent me. So Trevor, thank you so much. And we've been using these things, and they're awesome. So naked infusions right here. Very cool. And yeah, I love that. Love that salsa. So that is that. Black Rifle Coffee Company. Bam. The exclusive coffee subscription club. If you are not a member, I highly recommend it. And what do we have here? Oh my goodness. Look at that. I did notice this, and I think this is new. I'm not sure. Maybe I just didn't notice it before, if it was at the bottom of the box or not, but it talks about the coffee. It talks about exactly where it's from, the tasting notes, all that stuff, and then tells you how to prepare it, whether it's espresso press, Chemex, however you're gonna prepare it. It gives you some instructions there as well. So that is very cool. And you get the sticker. And what is that sticker of, you ask? I'm glad you asked. Because this one right here, and I think Chris Hunt out there, laissez-faire on Instagram, I think he might have had something to do with his artwork. I'm not sure. But this is Black Rifle Coffee Company's Beaver Destroyer. Anyway, they're always going to do something awesome and fun. But at the base, the coffee is amazing, because you can't do anything in life as far as a business goes without having that base product. All the marketing and everything else doesn't mean anything unless that base product is the best they can possibly be. And that's why these guys are so successful, because that base product, the coffee, is awesome. So Beaver Destroyer it is. Awesome. What else? Ball and Buck. My friend Mark Bowman. Awesome. Thank you. Ball and Buck right there. Yep. Awesome. Love their stuff. I've been a huge fan for years. And Mark just sent me this. This Upland jacket. So this is the new one, the 2.0. I have the earlier edition, the different color. Actually, I'm wearing it in the artwork for the cover art for this podcast. But this is the OD green one. And man, this thing is awesome. I put this on last night, and this thing is going to be a constant companion. So check out Ball and Buck. Just type that into the search bar. It'll pop up. They're doing awesome things and make some incredible gear, clothing, and do some really cool collaborations as well. So I think that is it for today. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. You can find out more about Mark Greaney at markgraineybooks.com, and you can get Sierra 6, which is out right now. Check out Armored in an Audible original, and then check that out this summer as well. You can find me at officialjackcarr.com. You can go to jackcarrusa.com for the merch, and on the social channels at jackcarrusa. My next novel, In the Blood, hits shelves on May 17th. That's a change. It was coming on May 31st. It's now coming May 17th. Coming in hot, early, and it is available in all formats for pre-order now. Thank you for tuning in. Sincerely appreciated. Take care out there. Be safe. Stay strong. Keep fighting.